All right. I am very excited to have this conversation, Kirsten, because we connected on a connection call,
Hmm.
and even just the conversation that we had there was, I feel like we were really diving into like the collective energy that obviously we both were feeling, but this collective energy that I just knew we needed to bring this to the podcast and have this conversation because it's kind of like this energy that people feel, but maybe not putting a lot like the words around. And it's around this idea of this correction, almost this reshifting of the coaching industry, the online space, but also on a collective level, all of us as humans. And you bring such a beautiful insight with human design and just with your own experience on how we can navigate the change and the turbulence of change.
Mm.
So I'm just so honored that I know with the time difference and everything, it's so early for you, but I just wanted to first honor you and thank you because that connection call was so beautiful and I'm just really excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and, speak into this because I think that there are so many people that are feeling it. But I also think that what I've witnessed is that although so many have been feeling it, not many people have been sharing it. And I think that there's been this sort of weird undercurrent of, I think, because of the climate in so many different ways, whether it be economical, social, there's just a lot happening. And I think because things feel quite precarious, that there is this sense of like everyone's been going through this kind of like inner winter, or like a vast majority of people have been going through this inner winter and this complete metamorphosis. And there's been a lot that's been happening behind the scenes. But I think that that vulnerability and that openness around that has not been translated as much. And I think that it's sort of like this, this feeling of like needing to present a facade that everything's fine. Like, this whole like everything that's happening is not affecting me because I'm a leader and like it's all good. And it's like, this like holding it together and just, keeping the facade going. And I think that, the other day I did a post and I kind of shared, what's been, real for me in the last 8 months. And I was pretty transparent about, what I had been feeling, with some of it was like, hopelessness and despair and like wanting to drift off into obscurity and shut my whole business down. Like, and so many people either commented or reached out to say, me too, like, this is exactly what I've been experiencing. Like, thank you for saying this. And I think that when we don't necessarily always talk to people about what's happening or have open conversations behind the scenes or let people into what we're sharing, we can often feel like we're isolated in that change. And, if you just were going through your experience and looking online, you would so feel like, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I struggling or why am I feeling this? Because we're just bombarded by, 10K months and six-figure launches and everything's great. And like my business is on the rise, I had the biggest. And so we're like, what is going on with me? Like, why can't I, hold it through this season? Or is it just me? And it's so not. Like, there's so many like people experiencing this exact thing.
Yeah. And I think it really brings to light this idea of changing the face of what leadership looks like.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think for a lot of us, leadership has been all about always getting it right and always
Yeah.
winning and always being able to, shift through the negative thoughts. And like, it's all about being on the other side of things. But the real leadership is created in who we are being when things aren't going right. Like, I know
Yeah.
for me that has really carved out my character, my way of leading way more than the wins. The wins are great, but
Mm.
the real character is in those moments where you don't know, right? Like
Mm.
to your point, like I could just throw all of this away and walk away and in those moments, just really looking at who shows up and who we choose to be is the self leadership that then can lead others. And I'm curious for you, Kirsten, like what has it been like? What has your winter felt like? What has been this season of change for you? And what has been the most supportive as you've navigated all the different corners of feelings from despair to anger to confusion?
Mm.
Like what has been your anchoring? What have you gravitated towards?
Mm. So I think that like last year for me was just so great. Like it was just a year where I had so much creative inspiration. Like I felt like, I just had idea after idea after idea, and I was just churning them out. I was just in this huge like momentum high, and it was so great. And it felt like everything was working, and it felt like, I'd finally found the secret sauce, and all the things were just like up, 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 up. And it was like, woo, like I was like riding the train high. And then it was like, imagine being on like a roller coaster and then having the brakes thrown on, and you just come to this screeching halt in the middle of the ride. Like that's what it felt like when I turned into this year. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I just need a little bit more rest. Like maybe I'll just take, really lean into, I was planning on like getting the momentum up in the first 2 weeks of January. I'm like, you know what, maybe I'll just take it a little bit easy. Maybe it'll be in the second half of January. And I'm like, maybe it'll be in February. Maybe it'll be in March. Maybe it'll be in April. I'm like, oh my God, it's halfway through the year. And it was like, when am I going to like feel like it's that new year energy that I want to get going again? And it just kept kind of sliding on, and it just felt like a really long winter. And I think what I, have found in this, season, which really has, I feel like is only just shifting now, and we're at the end of August, heading into the last few months of the year. But I feel like this whole year has just felt like the metamorphosis process that a caterpillar goes into to turn into a butterfly. It's like I have just felt like I've been in that chrysalis in the dark, like a little pile of goo, absolutely unsure of like if and when I will ever break out of this cocoon and what I will be like on the other side of that. And so it has really tested my faith for sure, because there was just times where I was like, well, maybe this is just, a sign that this is not the path for me anymore. And maybe I'm not meant to be doing this. And there was so much like, I don't know if you've seen the Barbie movie, but when she goes into like existential crisis Barbie, I'm like, that's what I felt like as well. I was like, having all these sorts of like, maybe this isn't for me, maybe this isn't my path, and maybe this isn't what and you're just having all these like full existential moments of like questioning whether this was what I was meant to be doing, questioning myself, questioning the industry, questioning social media, questioning how I want to show up on things. And so I did feel quite isolated in that myself, I know, because I was again like observing everybody seemingly still doing fine. And again, that made me question myself. I was like, well, maybe, I'm not cut out for entrepreneurship, because if I can't ride out this season of, change and challenge, maybe this just isn't for me. And I think there's so much like beauty, I think, that has come from this season now that I'm on the other side, but it was really fucking hard while I was in it. But I think what I've really realized is that although I was in a season of momentum last year, I think that my foundations were still a little bit shaky. And I think that's really what this year has shown me, is where my foundations weren't solid within myself and also within my business. And even just down to little things like systems, processes, the foundations of like how the business run weren't solid enough to hold me any further than I had already been. And I feel like that was for me as well. Like I internally wasn't going to be able to hold myself any further than I have been. And so I think that this season has actually gifted me the opportunity to, go like pull back a little bit, really solidify the foundations of my business. Like so much change has been happening behind the scenes, although not much has been seen outwardly. There's been a lot that's been taking place behind the scenes, both inner and outer. And I think for me, one of the biggest things for me, I think, has always been, this fear around using my voice fully. And I think also the fear around expressing myself, the fear around not being enough, like all of that has still been, I think, of an undercurrent. And there's been this sort of like subtleness in like where I was willing to be visible and how expressed I was willing to be. And I think that like this season has really felt like a death portal. And I think on the other side of that, I'm like, well, I already feel like I died. So I'm like, why would I be afraid to use my voice? Why was I afraid of all of those things? Because I feel like there's been so much of like facing fears and like really facing off with shadows in this season as well, that's left me just on the other side of this now. It's like, well, fuck it, you know? It's like, why not? Like, why not? I feel like I faced the worst and why not? But I think to your point of like what really held me through this season was I think, you know, when we think of like, you know, the hero's journey in all the movies that we see, one of the things that always gets them up again is their why. And I think that what I feel like has really, you know, been part of the big shakedown for so many of us this year is that our why wasn't big enough to pull us back up when we fell. And, you know, when you think about those movies, it's like they always have that moment where they fall down. You don't think they've got any energy left. They're not going to be able to make it. And they always just pull through for that tiny little bit of reserve to keep going and go again. But it's because their why is so like monumental that there's no other choice not to do that. And I think that for me, it was like really reevaluating my why and connecting back into what that actually looked like to be able to hold me into a bigger season. And so I think that it was really just connecting back into a deeper sense of purpose and absolutely recommitting to my vision and recommitting to move into a bigger season, but now on a more solid foundation.
Yeah. Oh, so good. I just want to echo that. I think that realization that happened within you is also a mirror of the correction that's happening on a grander scale, like digging into a deeper why. And similarly, like 2021 for me, I was like, like my business was really, that still has been my best year yet. Like last
Mm,
year was really a whole year actually of shadow work, and there was a bunch of
yeah.
like personal loss and like so much shifting. And the beginning of this year, similarly, I like ditched my launch. Like I was supposed to open up my signature program, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to offer this lower ticket like group
Mm,
program. And it's just been like so much pivoting. But to your point, I think so many of us are experiencing that. You know, we've
mm,
been in the industry for 3 to 5 years. A
yeah.
lot of us have had that season of like, you know, really being on the up and up, feeling like things are clicking, feeling like it's landing with people. People are, you know, reaching out and buying and all the
Yeah.
things. But then this year, last year going into this year, things have started to slow down. And I think it's because our whys started, and I mean, I'll speak for myself. I think that my why started drifting into like, what does this success mean about me? And
Mm,
almost like needing that validation.
yeah.
And going from last year into this year, I've had to dig deeper, to your point. Like we have to dig
Mm,
deeper when the, you know, the big money milestones aren't quite there, nor do we feel like we want to be fulfilled by that. We're like I didn't even want to sell that higher ticket thing in the beginning of the year. It's like, no, like that's just not, we become less nourished with the fuel that we used to operate from. But I think
yes.
that's the correction, right? Of like, what is the sustainable high nourishing fuel that's going to continue to propel you forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really want to like thank you so much for sharing that, because I do think that that's really the correction that's been happening for a lot of us, is having that correction happen so that we can dig deeper roots, so we can build the foundations internally, energetically,
Mm-hmm.
strategically, systematically, so that we can, you know, experience the next wave of our brands. I'm also curious because
Absolutely.
you are a human design reader.
Mm-hmm.
How did you leverage that? Because human design, like when people tell me, you know, what are the different elements of human design, I'm like, you could literally go down the rabbit hole. Like human design
Yeah.
can help you with anything from like relationships to digestion to environment to business. Like it's literally such a multi-dimensional tool. But I'm curious, how did you use that through this process to anchor back into maybe like how you were designed to be, your you know, your authentic self? And what are some elements that people can use, because we talk about human design here all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What are some elements that
Yeah.
they can use to anchor themselves when they're going through, you know, this season of like questioning and pivoting?
Yeah. You know, I think that was probably one of the hardest things for me personally because I'm a manifester. And, you know, last year, I think that was probably one of the greatest years of my manifestor experiment, although I'd been using it before, I feel like I'd really found my flow, like a real rinse and repeat pattern with surge rest cycles. And it was working really well. And I think that coming into this year, because I was in such a deep metamorphosis, and, when we were talking about that caterpillar process, and I really just felt like I was in the goo, really not having the energy or even the inspiration or desire or clarity to surge and initiate as a manifester was really hard. And I think that's actually what made the process so much deeper for me, was because I couldn't find that manifester energy anywhere. And it didn't matter really what I did, I just could not find that fire again. It felt like every time I got a glimmer of a spark, it was kind of like someone was pouring a cup of water on it. And so I was like, wow, okay, this just is not, like, I'm not able to pull that heat back out again. And so I think really having that acceptance in that season for myself of like, okay, well, this is actually not your time. Like, you're not meant to be surging right now. And that was, I think, part of the existential crisis. Like, well, who am I if I'm not a manifester? Who am I if I'm not initiating? Who am I if I'm not bringing newness to the world? And so it's like, can I actually be with myself when I'm not able to find that energy? And so I think that part of what really supported me around that was a few things. Like, I think environment in human design is really important as well. So, I think for me, as a valleys environment, like recognizing the things this year that maybe I was ready to unplug from before I could have this space to reconnect to things. And so there was a lot of like unraveling and unhooking going on behind the scenes, and also just like making that concerted effort that even when I wasn't feeling like it, taking myself to environments that I knew was at least going to be nourishing, if not uplifting, and just kind of like actively immersing myself in my aligned environment. I think as well, like for me, I'm a low sound determination. So, using music was actually really helpful for this process for me as well. And I think that what I've noticed, because I have, between the combination of really valleys, which laying on the floor is very self-regulating for a valleys environment, the low sound, I find music really helpful. And also I have the channel of emoting. So I find that I actually need that emotive processing time to be with my muse, be with my energy. I'm a single definition as well. So all of those little combinations, really what supports me is just laying on my breathwork mattress on the floor, or laying on the floor and listening to music and just being with my own energy. And so when I would go through those little pockets where I really needed that, that's how I would really support myself. And I think that I still just actively continue to choose the things that I knew that nourished me outside of that, my daily practices. I just, even when I didn't feel like it, even when it felt hard, even when I was like, is this even working? Like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I just kept doing those things, knowing that on the other side, that continually doing those practices, doing those things, even when it didn't feel like it was doing anything, I knew that it would, and I knew that it was holding me through that as well. So I think that I just kept doing the things that I knew worked, even when it felt like they weren't.
Yeah. I'm curious too, because as a manifester, your strategy is to inform.
Mm,
And I'm curious what that looked like for you, even as you were going through that process of reevaluating and not feeling the surges coming.
mm,
How did that look like, either like personally or in your business? Like, did you find yourself informing people like, hey, this is where I'm at, I'm still not ready, or hey, like, how did that informing come into play? Because I think a lot of time manifestors
mm.
think that informing only comes when you're in that surge.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like communicating all things really. Like, even
Yeah.
like letting the audience know, like, hey, okay, the surge is gone, I'm off now. um, I didn't really inform my audience because I didn't even know what to inform them of. Like, that's how like confusing it felt for me. I'm like, I don't even really know what I'm going through. So I don't even know how to articulate this right now. And so I think that was the purpose of my post last week, was really just like, okay, let me just clarify like what I've just been like traveling through now that I have the words to say it. Because, I'm also a 6-sign profile. I'm also a hermit. So there is that kind of like, you know, I'm sitting up on the roof trying to integrate these lessons to feel ready to speak about them. And so I think
Oh,
that
that makes so much sense.
so there wasn't a readiness for me to articulate that. I was like, I need to see this season through before I can even do anything with it. And I did, I think, maybe too prematurely, but it did also work out perfectly. I did run this 3-day experience called Metamorphosis, where I went through the 3, you know, phases of change in that experience. And I did, in that private space, speak into some of the things that I'd been traveling through. And I think that everyone was really in it, like really deeply in it as well, who had come onto that process too. So I think that that also was very therapeutic, that discovering that process and getting to articulate that. And that was, you know, one of the first things that was new that I'd initiated that year as well. So that also felt very therapeutic for me as a manifester. So I think that in that sense, I kind of informed a little bit about what I was going through, but I still felt like I didn't really have the full wisdom to share until now. So I feel like now there's so much more depth to what I feel ready to talk about, because I'm like, okay, we've been on the roof, we've done our thing. Okay, I'm ready to tell you all the things.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. The sixth line and the two with the hermit, like that makes so much sense.
Hmm.
And what it also brings up that I think is also important for every one of us to remember is that I think when we are so used to this fast pace of
Mm.
entrepreneurship, we believe that like our rest cycle or our reconfiguring season has to be like a week or a month or a
Yes.
quarter. Like
Or a day.
we try to time frame it in the lens of like business
Yeah.
timelines.
Yes.
And I think God just has a really great way of being like, no, like
Mm.
your season of evolution, you can't fit that into
Mm.
a business timeline sometimes, and you can't
Yes.
rush it.
Mhm.
And that's the most humbling experience I think we can have as entrepreneurs who are so used to, you know, this energy of like, I have to be the one to plan it and I have to be the one to really bring this to life. And I'm always like the next
Yeah.
thing, the next thing, the next thing. But to have those seasons where you're literally, like, literally for me, brought to your knees
Mhm.
and just full surrenderance and realizing we don't actually control as much as we think we do. And that's
Totally.
really important perspective to then
Mm.
carry into the next like high season, is to know
Yeah.
who's really in control.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you use that phrase, like being brought to your knees, because I think it was probably about February or March. And, you know, at this stage, I was already like well and truly over it. I'm like, okay, when is this going to snap? When am I going to snap out of it? Like, when am I going to have surge again? And I even took like a week off in my business, I remember at this time. And I went and took myself and did all these like appointments that normally would spark a surge. So I took myself, there's a place here called, you know, Soak. And I went to the bathhouse, and I had like a day at the beach, and I took myself to lunch, and I went and I did like, you know, the sensory deprivation, like float. Um, and in that float, I had this voice come through that was like, I'm bringing you to your knees to restore your faith. And I was like, okay, cool. Like thinking, oh well, great. I'm on my knees. I'm in the rest period. I'm like, great. The clarity's coming soon. That's amazing. I did not really understand that that was really only the beginning of the depths that I was going to go to. But that I feel like I have come back to so many times, because I really do feel like that is exactly what has happened this year. And I do feel like that, yeah, it really was, yeah, it did really get brought to my knees, and it has really restored my faith in a much deeper capacity, because I think before it was very shaky. It was very attached to the results I was getting. It's like, I'll have faith if, and now it's like, no, I just have faith.
Oof, period. I love that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what's coming up next now that you're on the other side of it? What's coming up, and how are you integrating this newfound level of faith into this next season of your business?
Mm. So I think the very next thing that's happening is I'm launching my human design reader training again. And so that hasn't happened in a year, like a proper launch around it. So that's something that's happening right now. But moving past that, I feel like it hasn't fully solidified yet, but I feel like a really big shift coming through in my business. And I feel like I'm ready to like breathe new life, new energy, new creations into that. And I think that a lot of that has to do with some of the reflection that I've been able to do in this season around some of my key purpose energies in my chart, and just getting like a lot of clarity around the things that really always bring me inspiration. And I went on a creative retreat in September, and part of what was in there, I was, we were, talking about what inspires us. And I think, particularly, I think if you've got an undefined or open head, inspiration is very important to seek from that healthy external place. And so I was really feeling into like, what are the things that bring me inspiration? And the things that I always get so damn lit up by, that I just froth over and get so excited, is like anytime I can like watch a documentary, or like do like a case study on someone who has just unintentionally like probably knows nothing about human design, but has absolutely nailed living their design and absolutely maximized the potential of who they are, and been so unapologetically an individual. And I have the incarnation cross of individualism, so it makes sense. But a lot of like my key purpose energies are all around like purpose and individualism, and moving into your potential, moving into that version of yourself. And so I think that for me, it's just really solidifying. It's like, okay, that idea of really maximizing our potential. And I love this idea of kind of, unlocking that inner icon that we all have within us. And I think that my definition of icon, because I shared this with someone recently and they were like, oh, I think that, because she was reflecting to me, I think the icon thing's really you, but she's like, do you like that because icons kind of have that status and they're like above us? Like, it's like that, full like, idolization thing. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, to me, that is not the definition of an icon. It's not like a guru. It's not someone on a pedestal. It's not someone better than us. It's just literally an example of how they have unleashed their unlimited potential of themselves and been so courageous to be like, this is me, this is my thing, I don't give a fuck what anyone else is doing, like this is literally like my lane and I am gonna ride it till the wheels come off. And so I feel like witnessing these people that we that really withstand the test of time, no matter like so many like generations, they just like continue to be like that person, people know about them, like they've got that thing, is because they constantly reinvent themselves, but they're constantly stand out as themselves. And I think that there's been so much, particularly, in the personal development industry, there's, and so many industries, anything where it's really online, but there's been so much sameness and mimicry and imitation and trends and viral reels and all the things, where it's like, I think people are so fucking sick of sameness. And that's, I think, part of this like exhaustion and detachment from online, and feeling like we don't want to be on there, and feeling like people aren't connecting with us, and all the things really just all comes back to the fact that people are sick of just seeing the same shit in their feed all the time. And I think that we really have been, particularly in this like winter season, that so much has been changing, and there's been so much like in the personal growth industry, there's been so much like blow ups and so much like so much like just craziness that's been happening, I think, in our space that people have seen. And I think it's caused so many people to retract. And I think it is time to kind of like shake that off and step into who we came here to be in like a really unique way. And I think that a lot of what I've been kind of playing with behind the scenes and kind of thinking about for this next season is like, how can we literally just tap into that inner icon where it's like we are so unapologetically ourselves, and we really leverage all the energies that are in our design, which is really just what we came here to contribute, but in a really authentic way that allows us to just really maximize the potential of who we came here to be, and not worry about all of the noise, and not worry about what we should be doing and following the rules, and actually just creating our own. And so I think that even though I'm not entirely sure what that's definitely going to look like, but I feel like that's the direction that I am, ready to steer things in.
Yeah. I love that. I love that we are tapping into that bigger message in such unique ways, because yeah, I mean, I feel like even with people's businesses and marketing, like marketing is one of the first places where people are like, I just don't want to do it because I'm tired of fitting myself into this box. Right? Like I'm tired of doing things a certain way, talking about it a certain way, following certain launch plans. Like And I think the beauty of all of these ruptures, the inner ruptures, the identity ruptures, like who am I when I'm not this? Who am I when I'm not on the mountaintop? But also the ruptures in within the industry and collectively, is that each one of those ruptures has so much potential for creativity. Like
Mm-hmm.
when shit blows up, it's like, all right, that's off. Like the lid is off
Yep.
of this. So how are we going to iterate? How are we going to innovate and create? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's been a journey for me too, and tapping into like, what is that new expression? What, how do
Mm-hmm.
I really want to show up? How do I want to convey this in a way that's
Yeah.
authentic to me? And that's the line, right? Not just trying to be different for the sake of being different, but naturally being different because you're so in integrity with your design, with your energy, with your expression, that that is different. It just naturally
Mm-hmm.
differentiates you, because in a culture of, well, that's working, so I'm going to mimic that, you're the one that's like, I'm setting my own rules. Like this is the form of
Yeah.
expression that's in alignment with me, and you just act according to that. And I
Mm.
think knowing one's design is one of the most powerful ways to start having something reflect back to you. Because, and I'm sure you see it too when with readings, and when people learn more about their design, they're like, this is me. And I
Yeah.
know that this is me, but I've never had words to it. I've never
Yes.
quite heard somebody reflect back to me something that has been so
Totally.
innately me. And that is
Totally.
the best. That is
I
the
know.
best moment.
And I think that like that is one thing that I am so grateful for human design, is that no matter what happens, like even through this season, I was like, I still know who I am. I still know what I'm here to contribute. I just don't know how I want to do it right now. But I still had that solid understanding of like what my primary purpose was. And I still had that kind of real core essence. And I was like, okay, but that's where a lot of the confusion was coming, was like, but how do I want to express those energies now? It's like the energies didn't change. What I want to do didn't change. My core drivers didn't change, but it's like the ways that they wanted to be expressed wanted to change. And I think that that's where, I think, when you're talking about marketing, I think one of my biggest realizations actually, weirdly, through experimentation, I think over this season, and a couple of things that really happened and transpired in this season was, it's interesting that when things started to shift, so I launched a membership at the end of last year, and it was a bit of a gamble, like as a manifester with an undefined heart. I was like, is this model going to be working for me? And like, I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the idea. I loved the visuals. I loved the essence inside the program. I loved everything about it. But it also, I think, was the wrong model for the right idea for me personally and my energetics, because it wasn't actually giving me any spaciousness to detach from that project and have those reflections. And I think also having to be like on all the time, it really like limited my capacity for anything else, because it was essentially like a full mastermind with a membership program. I had so much in there. It was, like a call a week. Like there was so much going on in there all the time. And I loved it and it was beautiful. And also it wasn't quite the right fit for me. But one of the things that I noticed in that time as well, that was one of the things, but within the marketing piece and the branding, I think, because our visual marketing is also equally as important as our message as well, right? Because it tells a story. And I realized on the other side of this as well that, when we're talking about, when you were talking about 2021 being your biggest year, at the end of 2021, that was when things really started to kick up a gear for me. Because I'd left a really challenging relationship, and, I had the spaciousness. It was just like, that was like my runway had opened up for me to create in. And at the end of 2021, I did this photo shoot where I actually intentionally used the four incarnation cross energies as kind of the essence for the shoot. And I communicated them to the photographer, and we really had this clear vision. But these are the energies we're bringing through. And for me, I have the gate of the fighter, the gate of provocation, the gate of shock, the gate of intuitive clarity. So there's some big energies in there. And we really like brought that through in the visuals. And one of the images I used for this program I had at the time called Alchemy, but it was spelt with ME on the end. It was all about like using our human design to, again, maximize our potential. And so that offering was amazing, but the visuals were, I think, what really sold it in, because I had this, image where I have all this orange smoke that's coming around me, and you can kind of just see like my face kind of like tucked in under the smoke. And it's like full power. And like, I honestly feel like I had so many people immediately say, they're like, oh my God, this photo, you and your power. I want it, whatever this is, I want in. I don't even care. Like, I just want in, because it was just like that really encapsulated, like, this is the energy, like, this is my energy, but this is the energy we're bringing. And it was interesting because I feel like that was so, like, I was so close and so spot on with what I was here to bring. And then it was interesting when I started my membership, I really had this idea that I wanted it to be light, I wanted it to be fun, I wanted it to be playful. And so I did this other shoot that was like disco balls and fun lighting, and it was all like fun play energy. And I didn't realize at the time, but because I ended up, like, obviously going through this winter season, so I didn't do any shoots or anything this year. And so I actually ended up using those fun disco ball images for like 8 months. And it was really only meant to be just for that one program, but it like ended up just kind of like cannibalizing my, brand. And I, ended up using changed my images online and all these things. And what was so interesting is, like, during the time that I changed all the images online on my website to this shoot, my organic traffic off my website and my organic sales from my website dropped. I also noticed that people weren't connecting in the same way to me, what I was sharing, etc., online. And then I actually had, in the same week, like 3 people. As I was having this realization, I had 3 people, and this is like how I knew. I was like, okay, I need to do something here. I had 3 people in the same week basically say, like, I don't love these photos as much as your old ones, in various ways. And I was like, wow, okay. So I actually went back onto my website. I changed all the photos back to the old ones that had been from that, full power shoot. And, even though some of them were really soft, there was still that essence behind them. And so I changed them all back, and like, they're much more in the earthy tones as well, which is like my branding colors and my vibe. Like, my whole house is neutral. But these other photos were like purple and yellow and blue and like disco and shiny and sparkly. So it was just like not my colors even. And then I started to, shift everything back on my socials as well. And like, immediately, like, this boom happened again. And I did another shoot in that time being, where I'm sort of starting to use those images now, but it like that was sort of like a bit of a buffer, I think, to kind of transition out of that period. But now I'm sort of really realizing the importance of also using your human design energies, not only in the way that you show up, not only in the way that you speak, but the way that you communicate that visually. And so that has been probably like a really big lesson of this year. And so now I have, like, obviously a much bigger concept for this next season of like where I want to take those images again to really represent that. But I was like, wow, it's so fascinating that even when you deviate from who you are visually, even in like colors and images that I thought felt really aligned at the time, people can't feel you in those. And it's like, I think that there's just so much power in really understanding like who you are and what you want to bring to the table, and letting that come through in every single way possible. Like your offer creations, the way that you communicate, what you're talking about, and also the visuals that you bring to the table as well.
Absolutely. Like, it's all an energy transmission, and
Mm-hmm.
we can't fake resonance. And I think we're coming deeper into that realization now, especially, where the industry is going, is there was a lot of marketing that was like so forced and really forcing the idea of like a luxury lifestyle, laptop lifestyle, and like all about the showiness and,
Yeah.
having it all together. Like, there was a lot of performative marketing, but to your point, right? Like, people can feel you when you're there. And when
Mm-hmm.
you're not there, and when your energy is not coming through, then that shows in the level of resonance that people can feel even through a photo. Like, it's all
Yeah.
energy. It's all
Yeah.
energy, and resonance is resonance, and we can't fake something that's not true.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anything else that you wanted to share as we wrap up? And then I also want you to let everyone know where they can find you, hang out with you, and where they can check out the reader training when it opens back up.
Mm. Anything else I want to share? Hmm. I feel like just within, I think if you are in a season of change right now, I heard this quote when I was in the midst of my change, and the quote was, "You're planted, not buried." And I think that that was actually really powerful for me to remember, because I think sometimes when we are in those seasons, and even for me, when I'm in a rest season as a manifestor, sometimes it can feel like you're in the naughty corner, you're getting punished. Like it's like, why is this happening to me? And I think sometimes as well, like one of the things that I really realized in this winter season for me was that although it felt like I was getting taken out of the game and it felt like I was buried and I was being buried, that shift in that perspective of the fact that I was actually planted was really monumental, because one of the things that I realized in my period in this year has really been that development often happens in the dark. And that is the same when we look at nature. That's, exactly how we even grow in the womb. That's also how film is developed, like old school film, like development happens in the dark. And sometimes we don't know when we're going to crack through that soil. We don't know when the season's going to shift. But sometimes it's like, if we think about, say, for example, if you're growing a plant and that little leaf is like cracked out of the shell and it's below the soil, and we like scoop the soil away and let the sun hit it, that plant's going to die because it's not ready to be seen yet. It's not ready to be visible. It doesn't have the roots. It doesn't have the strength to withstand the heat of that new environment. And so I think that when we make that shift of like, when we are in those times of change, it's like, okay, I'm planted for a reason. And the soil that's actually around me, or this dark as I feel around me, is actually cultivating deeper roots. It's cultivating more strength. It's cultivating my ability to then grow into a new environment. And I think that inner shift and that visibility to see that we're actually being nurtured in an environment, because maybe we're actually not ready to be in the next one. And I think where I was kind of talking about that death portal for me is like, what I realized is that the environment that I wanted to grow into, like, could not actually happen before I had that season. Because if I had have just kept going the exact same way as I was going, even though I thought it was great, I can now see that that was as far as I was going to go. And like, there was no ability to grow any further because my roots weren't deep enough. Like, I wasn't able to grow where I wanted to grow without actually having that season shift. And I think that, like you were talking about, there is such, I think, that narrative, particularly in the online environment, how you can just keep scaling every month and it's just this upward journey. And that's not necessarily always correct. Like, there's always going to be peaks and valleys. And when we're in the valley, it's like learning the lessons that's going to be able to get us up that next mountaintop. But I think just like really reinforcing that idea that, if you are in a winter season, it's like, allow that to support and nurture what needs to happen, and know that that shift is going to take place at some point, and then you're going to be ready for that new environment.
Wow, that quote is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, the valley is just as valuable as the mountaintop, and
Mm-hmm.
not making any part of our journey wrong, right? To your point, like, we don't want to just, always be in the spotlight, because when we don't have those deeper roots and we don't have the character developed and the systems developed, like, the spotlight can burn us. It's something that can
Exactly.
quite literally incinerate us. And
Right.
yeah, I love that perspective so much. And I just know that this message is going to just bring light and life to so many
Mm.
people, because this is
Yeah.
such, I know, like, we know, we've had so many
Mm.
conversations with others in our space that are feeling this so deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just really excited to see how this lands with people. And
Mm.
thank you so much for being so transparent and for
You're
sharing this
welcome.
part of your journey. I know you've only just
Mm.
started to talk about it, so
Yeah.
I really respect,
Yeah.
and honor that you've been so open here about it.
Mm.
So thank
And
you.
I think
Thank you.
exactly what you said about being burned by the spotlight. It's like, I think sometimes we're like, I want more followers, I want more clients, I want more opportunities, I want more visibility. And it's like, I think that what I realized, and, this is probably so true for so many, it's like, if we would actually get that, there's obviously, different things that come with more, right? Different, there's, more opportunity for backlash, more opportunity for criticism, more opportunity for, our insecurities to show up, our self-sabotaging behaviors to show up. Like, there's other things that also come with the concept of more. And I think that what I really realized is like, if I, did move into that space of more and received any of the criticism or any of the things that came with it, I most likely would have given up. Like, and that's what I was sort of talking about with that shaky foundation. It's like, I don't think I would have been able to withstand that on the current foundation that I was using. And so I think that, that's really, I think, one of the powers, I think, of going through these seasons is because we do get to like find our grit, find our determination, find out what we're made of. And that in turn, I think, allows us to step into bigger spaces or be transferred into bigger pots or new environments, is because we've got the ability to hold that next phase. And so, although none of us want that, it's like, if your foundation isn't willing to withstand that, maybe you are planted in the soil to protect you and nourish you to be able to withstand what will come from that next level, because otherwise maybe you would have given it away. So it's like, are you willing to go through a season of winter to be able to have longevity and a career that lasts a lifetime? Or do you just want a winning season, and then as soon as things change, you're out? Like, so it's like, sometimes you're actually being protected from the thing that you want because you're actually not ready to hold it. And so I think that sometimes we can use this opportunity to really like look at what needs to change in order to evolve individually, in our business, as a collective, and utilize the gifts while they're there. Because I even had this recognition, even at one point in this season, I was like, even though it was like really hard and challenging, I'm like, I really want to try as hard as I can to be as present as I can in this season and really extract the juice from it, because I knew it was going to change. And I'm like, there might be a time where I actually miss this season of my life. And like, it's like, I actually like, actually need to just be with what is here and know that this time, whatever is happening, is never going to happen again. So it's like, let's just be in this experience and see what it has to offer.
Yeah, I love that. And the more we fight where we're at, the bumpier the ride.
I
And
actually like,
that's always so hard.
yeah. I actually love this. Lauryn Hill, she did this speech to a school like back in the 90s. And I like often come back and rewatch this. It's on YouTube. I can send you the link if you like. But, she even was talking then about her journey in the music industry. And obviously after she released her album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, they like, the whole industry was like, oh my God, like, you're amazing. Let's get another out. Like, we've got to capitalize off this opportunity. Let's get another album out. Let's go. And she said that she went back in the studio and she said music was created that she thought people would enjoy, but, she realized it wasn't her best. And so she said what she observed in the industry, in the music industry at that time, which is so even just replicating in our audience, it's like when people hit the mountaintop, she was like, what she saw is like people grip on and they're like, I'm here, I've arrived, I'm not going anywhere. And she was like, without realizing that the purpose of life is actually to descend off that mountain into another valley to get experiences and explore another mountain. And she was like, so I'm on the, coming down the other side of the mountain. And she's like, everyone's like, where are you going? We're supposed to be up on the top of this mountain. And she's like, but she was like, basically that her art wouldn't be able to be created if life wasn't lived in the process. And I think so much of what we experience in the valleys actually informs the work we do, that we share on the mountaintop, that impact other people coming up outside of the mountain as well. And so I think without those periods, like, we're not necessarily always as inspired to do our best work. So sometimes I think we can see the valleys as like the shaping period that's going to inform the next season of our greatest work.
Amazing. Beautiful insight. Thank you so much for everything that you shared. And where would you like people to find you next? Because I know after this interview, they're gonna be like, where can we chat? So where can they find you?
So I'm primarily over on Instagram, which is just at kirstenmorrison.co. So come over and chat to me there. And then my website is just kirstenmorrison.co. So yeah, people can head over there. There's a, free 5-day experience to activate your inner icon in there. So that's something that people
I
can
love
connect
that.
with anyway. But aside from that, like I said, the next thing that will be reader training, and that may have already started by the time this podcast episode comes out, but it's actually open all year round. So basically we're just doing like a live round, in the next few weeks. But you're more than welcome to jump in anytime. And there's, ongoing support in there as well. And then, yeah, we'll see where things go for the next season.
I'm so excited for you. I know there's going to be so much goodness coming through. So I'm excited to stay connected and see what evolves. But Kirsten, thank you so much
Mm.
for being here today. And I just really appreciate you.
Thank you. You too. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to share about what's been happening the last few months. And I know that you've been going through a similar thing, so I appreciate your insights as well.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Catch you in the next episode.